Hi, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela with Blue Bear Flutes, bluebearflutes.com, our website where you can find the flutes that we make for sale. And also, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok as well under Blue Bear Flutes. Today's video is kind of a follow-up on a video I had done a couple of years ago. And I wanted to mention that video because it was a lot of fun doing it. It was not something I'd done before, and I thought, well, hey, let's try this, and we did, and it turned out pretty great. Now, a lot of you that see my other flute making videos, I guarantee you've probably seen this one I'm talking about, but if you haven't, I do recommend going back and watching it because it was kind of cool. I made this flute right here in the video. This flute was made out of a teak cutting board that I bought, I believe at Walmart of all places, at some little store like that. It was $7 when I bought it. And that's what we named the videos, Teak Flute for under $7 or something like that. This flute sounds incredible. Most of you who know anything about me personally, I don't care for hardwood flutes. I really like softer wood flutes because they sound like what a historic Native American flute would sound like. As anybody does, I tend to enjoy hearing very clear tones. I like to be able to play with some level of volume. And with all that in mind, soft woods or soft hardwoods, which is what we use today, actually can accomplish that and keep it within the realm of what a Native American flute really should sound like. At the same time, not destroying some hardwood forest off in Germany or Switzerland or South America at the same time, and doing something that we really shouldn't. Now, that having been said, I want to make sure that I don't use as a qualifier having bought the wood from a super chain store like Walmart, or in the case of this one, Home Depot. I don't want to use that as a qualifier of the wood was sustainably harvested, because that's not guaranteed. As a matter of fact, it could be something that's in your store today and gone tomorrow. I don't know. I haven't seen these teak cutting boards in the store in a long time. I don't go there very often, to be honest with you, but I've kind of glanced over and I haven't seen them there, so I don't know that they're still selling them. They do have some other really neat looking hardwoods like acacia on occasion, and a few others. I've seen probably some thick bamboo, which would be the coolest thing to make a flute out of, and I've made a lot of flutes out of bamboo, but not like a sheet or a board of bamboo. So that's something I might be doing next. I've done it once or twice. As a matter of fact, I did do it with another cutting board that was like a parquet floor looking material, and that flute turned out beautiful. As a matter of fact, I made a twin to that flute for a dear friend of mine that I hope he plays it regularly. It was one of my favorites that I've ever sent anybody. But that's another good video to look at too if you want to see a flute made out of another cutting board. This is the teak flute. So, like I said, this sounds amazing, and I do love playing it, I really do. I'm not suggesting that people should make Native American flutes out of teak. It's just not really, in a lot of cases, it's not economical, and in some cases it is quite comical. That's what I'm going to get to in a second. But it's just not something that really reflects what I think a Native American flute should look or really even sound like. Once again, I love playing this little guy. Even this little turtle there is made out of a piece of that teak cutting board. I cut several of those turtles out and gave them to friends and family and whatnot. Today's video, what we're going to make is a drone flute out of this piece of teak. As you've seen in the beginning, I bought it at Home Depot. It is, I believe, from Brazil, with a little tag set on it. It's a nice thick piece of wood. Honestly, that's quite a hunk of wood right there. I don't think it was deforesting where they cut this at. I think it was probably something that was I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I haven't looked into the lifespan of teak like I have poplar, which is what we make our drones for sale out of. I'm not going to be selling these on my website, not that I'm aware of. I mean, I'd have to charge way too much. This thing here is out of the wood so hard that my tools are going to be crying when I'm done, and I'm going to be buying new bits. But anyway, it's a beautiful wood. It sounds good. It looks good. There again, not really reflective of a historic Native American flute, but we're going to make a drone out of it. I'm going to make a low E drone. I've got videos on making other drones. I think I've made an A drone and a low D drone, which is lower than this. The low E drone is one of my favorites I like to offer. If you know, my 5th drone, or Aztec Temple drone, has a low E on one side of it, which is a lot of fun to play. I'm going to make a low E drone out of it, and I'm going to, unlike the other video, I'm going to talk in this one and tell you do this and do that, and I'm going to show you the way that I'm going to do it isn't the way that I've historically done this, and not the same way that I made that little guy. Because these days we use so much wood and make so many flutes that I'm going to use my CNC machine. It's set up for it already. I'll show you how to do it on a router table. Like I said, I've done that on other videos, how to do it on a router table. Eventually I'm going to show you how to do it by hand. We're getting there. It's just time. But anyway, we're going to do that. Now, to tell you a little bit about the other video, if you haven't seen the video of me making that teak flute out of a cutting board for under $7, I had so many comments on that video. The comments were probably the most amusing thing to me, more so than making the flute. A lot of the comments probably came from either the same people or the same group of people or groups of people from the same idealistic set. And that's pretty rough. I'm actually categorizing you people as a group and as an idealistic set. That's like dehumanizing, but I'm sorry about that. Anyway, long story short, a lot of people said, you didn't make that flute for $7. How much did your tools cost? I'm like, well, what do you want me to make it out of with my tools? You know, the wood costs $7. That's all I paid for. I think it was like $6.98, and I only used a piece of it. I still have some left. This board today costed me about $40. So that's, I think, a steal in my opinion for what you got. I'm imagining it's probably supposed to be used to make a table or something because it's so thick. And they had a wider piece than this. I bought this one because I didn't need a lot of it. Yeah, so this board cost me $40. One person said that you had thousands of dollars worth of tools. Actually, that's quite an underestimate. I have over $1 million worth of tools. And the tools aren't what made the flute. I don't know if you can wrap your head around that, but I'm hoping to tag this video with enough of the same names that I can get some of those same people back to watch this video as I did that one, because I can't wait to get their comments. Regardless of what tools I use to make this flute, if I used a draw knife to make this flute, and it took me at least a year or two of straight work on it to make the flute so that you can see it could be made for under $40. Regardless of that, the time that I have spent is so much more valuable than that. The time that I spent making that other flute video was probably into the thousands of dollars of my time. So there's no putting a price on any of that. But I did make a beautiful, beautiful sounding teak flute, and it costed me less than $7 worth of materials. The video wasn't about how you could make a teak flute for under $7. I mean, honestly, you could make one for free if you lived in Costa Rica or Brazil, or maybe Hawaii. Wouldn't cost you a dime, would it? Then that's if you know how to metal forge and forge out your own draw knives. But this guy right here, it's $40 worth of wood. I'm going to turn it into a beautiful low E drone. I hope it's going to be beautiful. I hope it plays wonderfully, because I really enjoy the sound of the other one, even though, like I said, I'm not going to make these for a living. I don't want to promote something that is both not native and not really, you know, it's not going in the right direction for what a Native American flute should sound like. But anyway, I'm excited to do it. And let's see the comments from those people that have left me such hilarious comments. I mean, my expertise is probably worth more than the amount of money in this shop and what it's costing me to tool this shop. But anyway, There's a lot of funny comments on that video. It's so worth just reading the comments. If you get a chance, read through the comments. It's almost as entertaining as the video was, I think. And then feel free to comment on those. That'll let me know that you've seen them. I'd love to hear what you've got to say. But anyway, yeah, a lot of people commenting about you couldn't do that for this much money. It's not really true. I mean, you could have done this for free if you lived somewhere this wood grew. But anyway, let's go ahead and get it cut up for a drone. Oh, one other thing too, I didn't talk in that video. And so you just hear music the whole time. One of the other comments I've heard is, it would have been nice to hear flute playing instead of this music the whole time. And I'm thinking, well, that's for you. You know, I mean, for me, I've been listening to the flute playing for the last 38 years, so this is what you get. You may hear some of that music in this video as well, but this video is going to tell you how you can make your own. And that's something I probably should have done a little shortly after I made that other video, but it was sure a lot of fun. I've even got recent comments. The video's been up for a couple of years, and I've got comments just the other day about, it didn't cost you $7. I looked down just now because this is a saw stop saw, and it's got two computers inside of it, and I had to wait for one of them to boot up, so I was just checking to make sure that it was there. Little plug for saw stop. They don't pay me. They probably should have, but I didn't ask them for money. I am glad that this saw won't cut my fingers off, though. I hope. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut 2 strips of wood. They need to be 23 inches long and 2 3/4 inches wide, which is what I've got my set here on. Okay, if you see me looking at it there, it's because I was trying to decide if I wanted to leave this strip. This is made out of pieces of wood that have been laminated together, and if I wanted to leave that strip, or if I wanted to make it out of the whole piece of this, as I did with this. But I don't think that strip looks bad. I'll be fine with that. When you're making a Native American flute, and you're making it with this 2-piece method, which is what I used to always do, and historically what Native Americans that made wooden flutes back in the old days used to do, out of 2 pieces, not out of this particular wood, not with the table saw. The wood would be split in half, hollowed out, and then put back together with something to laminate it with, whether it be beeswax, animal fat, some type of glue, resin, what people call pine pitch glues like hide glue or animal part glue. There's all kinds of glue you can make out of different animal parts. But anyway, that's how they would put it together, and then they would lash it with some anything from rawhide to leather. Most of what I've seen has been leather. A lot of people preach rawhide to help keep it together. And anyway, that would make the flute. So what we're going to do today is similar. I'm making it in 2 pieces. I'm going to run these 2 pieces through my CNC machine. After I do, I'm going to show you what the width of the tracks are and how much you need to do this, that, and the other. I'm going to go chop this down so that it's about 24 inches long, and then we'll run it into the machine, and you'll get to watch some of that, which is kind of mesmerizing. Anyway, so we'll do that next. This wood has kind of a, I don't know, it smells like a Campbell's soup or something. I really should have been wearing my mask. I usually do when I'm cutting weird hardwoods. Poplar is kind of hypoallergenic. It's something that people use for tongue depressors and popsicle sticks and whatever kind of wood that needs to be near the human body. So I imagine it's probably okay. We cut a lot of poplar. That's what our drones that we offer for sale on our website are made out of. It's a hardwood, sustainably harvested, used all over the world, very hypoallergenic, takes a stain uniformly and looks pretty good. And even though it's a hardwood, it's one of the softest hardwoods, which you can really carve by hand. But I prefer the softer woods because they sound more like a historic Native American flute. Let's go chop this to 24 inches long, put it in the machine, and see what happens. Here it goes. Okay, so one thing that I should have mentioned is that when you choose a piece of wood, or if you have wood available to you and you're wanting to make a Native American flute out of it, or whatever you're making out of it, you need to think about what the wood's going to look like on the surface. So some woods look one way and some woods look the other way, and sometimes you can turn this one that way and you might like that design better, or that design. I have chosen the darker and more wavy design for the top of the flute here. I think that's going to look a lot neater. Now, I've got to tell you, once I plane this down to the right thickness, it's not going to look like that anymore either. It's going to change a little bit, somewhere in between that and that. Of course, if you can imagine, this is a flat piece. But let's get into some measurements so that nobody cries about me not telling you how to make a flute. I've made hundreds of videos on how to make a flute. So, and also for those of you who only speak British, I'm also going to give you the measurements in whatever these little numbers are. So, I'm just kidding. Of course, British use standard like us here in the United States, but the rest of the world likes metric system. I use both honestly in the shop, and I find that for finer tuned things, I usually use the millimeters and centimeters, and for more large and grotesquely obtuse things, I'll use feet and inches. So it's just me. I mean, you might find it better the other way around. One thing I'd like to tell you about what we did here is the width of this inside is about 7/8 of an inch, which should be about 0.8 something, 0.9, that's close enough. I think it's 0.875 if I remember right, but the difference between 0.875 and 0.91 is, oh my gosh, my math isn't working. Could you tell me in the comments below what the difference between 0.875 and 0.91 is? I'm just kidding. I did that in my head before I even started. But so it needs to be about 3/4 of an inch wide. I do have other videos, specifically that low D drone video, that'll show you how to accomplish that with a router table, and it takes a couple of passes to do so. You could accomplish the same feat, and I'm going to tell you, I had a friend back in the old days. Let me show you. Every flute this man ever made was with a rotary tool. This is a Dremel brand rotary tool. It's cordless. It's about 100 years old, and it works kind of when it wants to. But this is a sanding drum here on the end. There's so many other tools you could use. You could use a sanding drum or a burr or deburr, depending on which side of the field you live on. But he always used a sanding drum, and he would use 2 or 3 sanding drums per flute, and he would just gouge this sucker out like this by hand. I mean, and that was back in the old days when we really first started making flutes. But you don't have to have a CNC machine to do this. You don't have to have millions of dollars worth of tools to do this, or hundreds of dollars worth of tools. You can do this with a knife. Maybe somewhere around the time this video comes out, you'll get to see my wooden flute video where we gouge it out with a knife. I talk all about the different types of blades. I do have plans of making another wooden flute by hand video, which you guys will definitely enjoy. I know I will, because it won't be made out of the same wood and it'll be a little bit softer. Gosh, it took hours. But anyway, so, you know, the width of the track, the depth of the track to make it a circle needs to be about half that. In other words, if it's 0.875, you need to divide that by 2 or multiply it times 0.5, and the number is, oh my gosh, my math isn't working. Could you post that in the comments for anybody who doesn't know what half of 0.875 or know how to use a calculator is? So there's that. And then the length of the flute track, I was just discussing with my wife before we started this video, my flute blanks in my CNC machine all had this little ending piece on it. So for customers, when we make a G or an F sharp, we usually chop them off and kind of go from there. This E is really pushing the limit. It's so close, I really need to extend the pattern just a little bit this way. I haven't done it yet. I'm going to. It's just, you know, at the time I made this pattern, I was in kind of a hurry some years ago, and it's been working. But anyway, long story short, the track inside of the flute needs to be about 3/4 of an inch wide, and really 18 inches would be just about perfect for a low E flute. Right there is about where it needs to be. When I remake my pattern, it's going to be about 18.5, but 18 inches will make a low E flute. Honestly, my pattern shows that there's a hole right there is where that other hole goes. So let's talk about where the fingerings are in both standard and metric. Let's say from the end of the flute down here where this is the air supply chamber. This is the beginning of the flute, the actual flute itself, the body, the sound hole. There's so many different things we can call it. But let's go down here and take a look. I'm going to read them for you. Don't ask me, isn't it this, because you see it differently on the camera than I do here in front of me, because honestly it doesn't matter. Anyway, so this is about 6 7/8, but actually it's almost, no, excuse me, gosh, I'm reading backwards here. It's actually about 6.5 to that first fingering, and it's actually between 1/2 and 3/8. Anybody that wants to tell someone what between 1/2 and 3/8 is, feel free to in the comments. Otherwise, you can do like I do and just use the metric, which is about 162 millimeters. Oh, Charlie, your book says it is boop millimeters. I don't care. Anyway, this is just a rough estimate. When we get to tuning it, you'll see what I'm talking about. A lot of this matters and some of it doesn't. Just don't get hung up on it. So we're looking at about 7.5 right here. It's actually halfway between 7.5 and 7 3/8. Let's say that that is around about 185 millimeters. The next one over here is about 9.5 on the dot, which is almost 241 millimeters-ish. And somebody else is going to be taking their calculator out and doing 0.25 times blah, 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 and they're going to be like, it's not that, it's this. Well, it doesn't matter, okay? That's what my granddad said, and that should work good enough for you guys. So anyway, about 10 3/4 here to the next hole, which is roughly 273-ish millimeters, somewhere in that ballpark. And then we've got 11 7/8 for the last fingering here, which is really close to about 300 and let's say 4 millimeters, 304 3/4 millimeters. So that's where you're at. These measurements are in my book. Yes, the measurements I'm giving you may vary a little bit because I used a stick with markings on the side of it to mark this flute, just to let you know. And I don't want you to think that that diminishes the quality of the flute, not at all. As a matter of fact, that's what makes it handmade, and the fact that I know how to tune this sucker. A machine can't build a flute. A CNC machine can't build one. A 3D printer can't build one. People have to build flutes. I do have another video coming up about making a drone out of a very unique piece of material, and it was all machine made and probably machine built, this, that, and the other, but we'll talk about that in that video. But honestly, a machine cannot build a good quality Native American flute. A human being can. I use my machines to help me cut out the patterns that I have, that I've designed, and the fingerings that I just marked are easily within a rough estimate of where they should be. So that's what really counts. The next thing I'm going to do is go over and drill these holes out. I'm not going to drill the fingering on the back side of the drone out until I'm finished with it, just because that's a habit that I have, not because you have to be that way. You could actually go ahead and mark it with this last fingering here. If you know what chamber it's going to go into right there, you could mark it like that, but I'm not going to because I like to do it last, and you can see why in just a minute. But for the time being, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and get this ready, drilled, and I'm going to think about lightly burning it. I may not, because it's so clean inside. I don't know if it needs to be burned, but it might need to be sanded just a pinch, and then we'll glue it together. And the next part of the video will be planing it down, rounding the edges, tuning it, which is the most important part. So you guys come back and check that out in just a second. Okay, so something that I didn't mention, my wife brought up at the last minute here, we're going to tell you, this is a 3/16 drill bit. Honestly, a 1/4 inch drill bit will probably be okay, just to show you the size difference between the two. This big one here is a 1/4 and that one's a 3/8. Excuse me, 3/16. Anyway, so I drill it out of the 3/16. Some of the holes are going to be finished out at a 1/4 of an inch, and some of them are going to be about 5/16 of an inch. Just depending on what intonation requires. But I want you to see me drill out the sound hole and the air supply hole so that you can see what we're doing. I know probably a lot of you are thinking to yourself, you know, I would set up a guide so that it's always this and always that. That's really smart thinking on your part. Have you ever made 1,000 flutes before? Or 10,000? 100,000? I could keep going. So there is all but the last fingering, which I'm going to put in, like I said, while I'm tuning it. You can see reasonably straight. Keep in mind that that camera was contorting all around me while I'm doing it. That's why you see it bump. But there's the fingerings. There's the sound holes, which are eventually going to become, you guys, tish. Whatever the hell that is. And then here's your air supply holes, your sack. And then there's your, oh, that air supply chamber, sorry, and holes. Anyway, come back and watch this next part. Okay, so those of you who don't know, my favorite kind of wood glue is called Titebond. That's what I'm doing here, is using some Titebond. And I'm going to glue all of the mating surfaces of this drone with Titebond. Once again, not a sponsor of my channel, but I've been a sponsor of theirs for a long time. Okay, and let's see what happens here. Titebond is water cleanup. I think there are some quotes about safe and what have you on the labeling, which is good because that means you could use it on like food type products, spoons and bowls and anything else people make out of wood that needs to be glued together. Okay. And all I'm doing with my finger here is making sure that it has a uniform seal all the way around it. I will tell you something I used to do back in the old days. I used to go and seal the inside of the flute with glue as well. And that was actually not a terrible idea. Keep in mind it can separate down the road, so that may be something of concern. Sealing the inside of it doesn't make you better or worse. It's something you can do later. And okay, let's see what we're going to do. These have been the best clamps, by the way. And another plug for a company that I have supported for years and years and have never asked them for a dime. Harbor Freight. You want to talk about buying some inexpensive tools? Here's a place you can do that. And these clamps here, there are less than 1/10 of the price of most of the stores I've seen them for sale in. And they're from a company that puts a lifetime warranty on them. At least when I bought these, it was a lifetime warranty. I have replaced and exchanged a bunch of them, but not lately. Every time I've exchanged them, they've taken the design and upgraded it. And I've had these clamps here for 5 years now. They have seen more flutes than anyone you have ever heard of. And they're doing great. I'm just putting a couple extra just in case. Anyway, these clamps have been amazing. They're about 3 something a piece, I think. There we go. Now I'm going to let this guy dry like this. And we'll just see how that turns out. We'll come back tomorrow after it's sealed up really nice, and we'll plane it down, smooth the inside, put the track in it, round the corners, and smooth it off, and it should be a flute.